see an arm here, like an arm and leg there, part of a body there, a head. There's some really good stuff on the web that we put on about this, and we also showed some of the pictures in the book. But there's some really interesting stuff that we'd like to get to and take a look at from the Pathfinder landing site. But the most important thing about the Pathfinder landing site is, again, the latitude and longitude. So think about this. Richard does these presentations at NASA back in the late 1980s, early 1990s. He talks about the significance of 19.5 degrees and not so much 33 degrees, but 19.5. So what do? The first time they go back to Mars after that is they land at 19.5 degrees by 33 degrees. Well, Graham Hancock, who is a writer you may be familiar with, wrote in the Mars Mystery, still, you know, we can't deny the act of placing a tetrahedral object on Mars, that's the lander, at a latitude of 19.5 contains all the necessary numbers and symbolism to qualify as a message received in response to the geometry of Cydonia that we showed earlier. Moreover, such a game of mathematics and symbolism is precisely what we would expect if NASA were being influenced by the type of occult conspiracy that Hoagland, for one, where is Hoagland, is always trying to espouse. So thank you, Graham, for the endorsement. Now, we've talked about 19.5 degrees. 33 degrees is relevant in the Scottish Rite, so it's relevant to the Freemasons, but there's also some, perhaps, connection to tetrahedral geometry through the number 33 as well. 19.47, the sign of that is 0.3333. This is a little mathematical connection that Richard thinks is real significant, and I agree with him. I think it is significant that you have 333 as the sign. You've got sines, cosines, and tangents, basic mathematical constants. The fact that one of them would be 333 is very interesting. But there's another one that I think is equally important, which is there's a nodal system in mathematics called the Schlafly symbol. And what they do is they take the number of edges on a side of a given object and the number of vertices that meet at each edge, and they give it a number. So the simplest of these geometric forms, dodecahedrons and icosahedrons and all that, would be the tetrahedron, because it would be 3, 3, or simply 33. So to us, I believe, and we believe, I think, that 33 and 19.5 are basically stand-ins for each other. In other words, 19.5 is really obvious. It points you to circumscribed tetrahedral geometry, but 33 is a little bit more of an obscure way of getting to that same information. So it's a little bit more coded, a little bit more secret. Now, they continue to do this crap up to the present day. I mean, it's stuff, we could go on and on and on with all sorts of different connections. Here's the Great Pyramids at Giza. If you were to stand there at Giza and say, you know what, I want to walk from here to JPL. What you would do is you'd set up on a compass heading of 333, and that would put you straight across the pond, right into Pasadena at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. So, you know, it can be 33 or 333. We've talked about, in the book, we talk about Jeremiah 33.3, which talks about, you know, I've got great secrets I will tell you, and so forth. And again, I think these things were all planned out, these locations. And again, there's lots of other examples that we haven't talked about. It even happens right around here, okay? Right down the road on Aviation Boulevard is what used to be the TRW company. TRW is now bought out by Northrop Grumman, but Dan Golden, who was the director of NASA all during the Clinton administration, or most of it, and partly into the Bush administration, used to work for TRW. He was the CEO there. And if you were to drive down the road, just basically go out Century, take a right on Aviation, it's just about half a mile up there, and start following it down, you'd start noticing interesting street names. For instance, right here is Atlantis Street, which has to do, and Richard talks about, you know, why Atlantis is important. Mercury Avenue, Challenger Way, Columbia Avenue, Apollo Way. These are all, this, by the way, is part of the old Los Angeles Air Force Base. Douglas Street used to be the airstrip for the Los Angeles Air Force Base, and LAX itself was also part of the Air Force Base. So if you continue to head south, you notice these other street names, 122nd, 123rd, 124th, 125th. But if you keep heading south on Aviation, you'll go to the Los Angeles Air Force Base Area B. And again, you come over here and there's like, nothing interesting there. Utah Avenue, 135th, 134th. Oh, what's this? Here's Isis Avenue, coming right out of the Los Angeles Air Force Base. And then just a little bit further down, Isis Avenue, actually it comes down here and it actually ends right in this area and intersects with 33rd Street. Now notice up here, Rosecrans Avenue, there's some other names down here, and if you go to Google Maps, you look, there's no 32nd Street, there's no 31st Street, there's no 34th Street. It's all 124th, 125th, Rosecrans, Mariposa. Just out of the clear blue, right pointing down here at the Space Park area is 33rd Street. 33rd Street and Isis Avenue intersect right under the freeway here, and there's like nothing there. I mean, at least there's nothing in the pictures. I've gotten around the area. It's fenced off, so I can't actually get in there, but someday I'd love to go in there and start digging and see if there's a little pyramid or obelisk or something underneath there. So these rituals really continue right into today. This is the Luxor Hotel in Las Vegas. I just stayed there a couple days ago. Here's the Great Sphinx that protects it out front. It's a big black pyramid. It's glass. It reflects stuff. And I was sitting there waiting for the elevator. I was pretty buzzed. I'd been drinking and gambling all night. But anyway, I look at the address, and it's 3900 Las Vegas Boulevard. Well, so what? Well, that's 19.5 degrees times 2. Now, there's a pyramid in Long Beach. It's similar to this one. It's a big black pyramid, and I've noticed from the Google Map stuff it's offset from directly north. And I'm going to go down and look at that, but someday I guarantee there's going to be some sort of weird connection there. So the question was, what does this all mean? Why is this important? Back at the dawn of NASA, they commissioned a study called the Proposed Studies on the Implications for Peaceful Activities for Human Affairs for the National Aeronautics and Space Administration. And what it was is a study commissioned with a bunch of people, anthropologists, Margaret Mead, folks like that. And what they were trying to do is sort out what would happen, for instance, if NASA were to discover proof of life elsewhere. And as you go through this report, commonly referred to as the Brookings Report, because it was done by the Brookings Institution, you see that it raises the possibility that artifacts, gee, I don't know, like a big face on Mars, left at some point in the past by these life forms may be discovered through our space activities on the Moon, Mars, or Venus. Well, Venus, good luck, but the Moon and Mars, certainly. And then later on, it talks about how anthropological files contain many examples of societies sure of their place in the universe, kind of like this one, which have disintegrated when they had to associate with previously unfamiliar societies expounding different ideas, different life ways, and so on. And it talks about how the engineers and scientists would probably be the most shattered by the discovery of superior life elsewhere in the solar system. So that ain't so bad, because I think that's something we would all be worried about, but we would all expect them to be prepared for. But what really was bothersome was this passage right here, where it says, you have to consider what would happen if you let this stuff out, and how might such information, and they're talking about artifacts here, under what circumstances be presented to or withheld from the public, and for what ends? What might be the role of the discovering scientists? So they're proposing the question that should be asked, should you withhold it? Now, it's interesting because with 2001 again, Stanley Kubrick based the entire film 2001, he later said, on this report, the Brookings Report. His whole concept was you discover artifacts and you cover it up, and what are the consequences of that cover-up? Well, in 1961, right after the Brookings Report was, the Brookings Report actually was completed in 1960, sat on the desk at the White House, and then in April of 1961, it was sent to Congress. It made the news, and about 2 weeks later, John F. Kennedy went to, I forget exactly where it was in Washington.